A miracle in Pennsylvania, and our renewed American spirit is ready to charge toward Election Day. President Donald Trump survives an assassination attempt the week that the Republican National Convention begins in Milwaukee. How did we get here? What went wrong? And how do we stand up the way President Trump did on that stage, thrust our fist in the air, and join his fight? That's what we're going to talk about, and it begins right now. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. One of those moments where we're all going to say, do you remember where you were when it happened and who you were with? What a remarkable weekend, and what a remarkable way to start this huge, important, historic week in American history. It's great to have you with us today. We're live across the board. Unprecedented. I don't think we've ever done this before, but we're live on Rumble. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. We're live on X. Oh, hell, we could be on Newsmax right now for all I know. It doesn't matter. Right now, it's you and it's me. And we're going to go forward and carry on and fight that fight President Trump wants us to fight. In Western Pennsylvania, Saturday afternoon during a Trump rally, we've all seen the video by now. One lone deranged gunman, quite possibly motivated by the multitudes of deranged left-wing lunatics who have been calling the Republican nominee for president and the former president of the United States a fascist, a Hitler, a threat to democracy, the man who will ruin our country, who will end our republic as we know it, the man who, if he wins this November, will end all elections in our nation, a man who is a genuine threat to our survival. That lone gunman, inspired by those words, took aim and tried to blast his head off. And through the grace of God, Donald Trump survived. The mainstream media wants to make this story about rhetoric and how we're not unified. They want to make this story even about Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans inviting this kind of violence into our political discourse. More circumspect people in the media want this to be about the real threat that all politicians have or all public figures have in this day of polarization. Some people will just want to talk about the actual circumstances of the moment when that bullet whizzed by and clipped the ear of the former president of the United States. And many people also want to make this story about the actions of the Secret Service, some heroic, some highly questionable. Those are all facets to this story, make no mistake. But ultimately, when all is said and done, when we Americans reflect on the events of July 13th, 2024, the story will always, from this point forward, always be this. This is the story. One crazed gunman, a fanatic, quite possibly psychotic, bipolar, who knows, cannot stop this. Donald Trump, our former president and the nominee to win in 2024, just moments after a bullet missed his skull by a half an inch, insisted on showing everyone at that rally and everyone around the world that he is not done fighting, that he is better than okay. And the message that was sent about our strong country, our strong nation of Americans, was that you cannot knock us down. You cannot stop the American spirit, and you cannot stop what's in front of us. We will, as President Trump implored us, fight, fight, fight. But it has to be noted that it was, in fact, a fraction of an inch. One fraction of an inch difference. And we are having a very different conversation in this country today. Yes, by the grace of God, President Trump survived. But the very real circumstances that led us to this moment, they have to be evaluated and they have to be changed. That's what this fight is. That's what we're fighting for. How close was it? If you haven't seen the diagrams yet, it's a little jarring to think about. It's a little grisly to imagine that that's the top of President Donald Trump's head and that's his brain. But when Donald Trump's face is in that position, looking forward as he usually does during his speeches and rallies, that if he doesn't tilt his head in that inexplicable moment, we're looking at the Zapruder film. We're looking at devastation for him, for his family, for the Republican Party, and for our nation. President Trump says that he tilted his head that way to look at a graphic on a screen that showed the dismal failure of the Biden administration's border security disaster. He had stats and data provided by the Border Patrol Union. That would be the Border Patrol Union that Joe Biden falsely claimed had endorsed him at the debate. They jumped out and corrected the record immediately. I don't think Joe Biden has corrected the record. Funny how the takeaway for the mainstream media, the left, Joe Biden, and the Democrats from that debate is that Donald Trump lied. Joe Biden claimed the Border Patrol endorsed him in that debate. Where are the fact checkers? Well, that same Border Patrol that have, in fact, endorsed Donald Trump and provided the data that was on the screen that made Donald Trump tilt his head just like that, so that that bullet would clip his ear instead of penetrate and shatter his skull. That Border Patrol saved Donald Trump's life. That's what he said in an interview on Sunday. And it's hard to dispute it. Another angle of that little head tilt, that slight movement, and you can see the devastation. You want to watch the video? It's
take a look at what happened.
absolutely incredible. I want you to watch this again. I'll turn the sound off so you can see it. But as he tilts his head like that, you think about it. When his head was in the forward position, that's when the would-be assassin pulled his trigger. That's how quickly that tilt was. Watch. Right there. When the trigger was pulled, his head was in the position that would have, in fact, ended his life. Incredible work. And incredible work, by the way, for so many people in social media, in citizen journalism, who have been able to use their expertise, slow down these videos, take a look at what we all saw. Citizen journalists have saved the day on reporting this story and providing information that the mainstream media is just incapable of doing or uninterested in doing. We'll get to that a little later in the program. That said, the photographers in the front row of this rally absolutely captured images that will forever go down in history, including this remarkable shot. As you can see, the bullet whizzing past the president's head. You can actually see how the air is disrupted. And you can see the grimace on the president's face as that is the bullet that passed through his ear right when he tilted his head. How incredible is that photograph? This one's from the New York Times, Washington Post photographers. You know, the photographers don't get enough credit for the work that they do in journalism. And they're, for the most part, not like their counterparts who write columns. What an amazing moment. And what a day for all of us to sit and reflect on the miracle, and it truly is a miracle. President Trump has reflected, that's for sure. We're going to discuss a little later what he said and how this could, in fact, affect his decision making process for his running mate, because this certainly makes that decision that much more serious. It's not just a political calculation, is it? But also how he's going to address the Republican conventions this week. He told Selena Zito, the journalist from the Washington Examiner, who was in fact in the front row of this rally and was protected her own daughter at the time. He told her in an exclusive interview that he has torn up his speech that he planned to give this Thursday, and he's going to be writing a new one. Yeah, it's moments like this that definitely give you pause. If you're President Trump, it gives you pause. If it's Melania Trump, it gives you pause, but it should give all of us pause. We should all reflect on who we are and how we got here and how devastating this moment could have been in terms of changing our lives. And since it didn't happen, since we did have, I believe, the hand of God alter history at that moment, because we have this chance now, what are we going to do with it? You remember after the debate, Joe Biden had a rally, after they shot him up full of whatever it is he needed to be shot up with and gave him a teleprompter to work with. He wanted to show that he was coming back. And in that rally, this went viral. He had, a good 8-second moment where he said, yeah, maybe I got knocked down, but like America, I get back up again. Remember that moment? You saw it, right? The problem here is that it's a lie. He didn't get knocked down at the debate. Joe Biden just tripped and fell flat on his face. No one knocked him down. Donald Trump got knocked down by a bullet. And he got up again within seconds. And he was communicating with each and every one of us that day when he thrust his fist up into the air and said, fight, fight, fight. It reminded me of at a football game when a football player has like a devastating injury where both sides of the football game, both teams come out and you can see on their faces that they're terrified for the player's life, right? Because something horrific happened. Maybe they heard a crack of a bone, or maybe the person was unconscious. Devin Hamlin, you'll remember from last year, was actually dead and they resuscitated him on the field. They bring out the cart or sometimes even an ambulance and they strap the player in and they start to wheel him off. And generally speaking, usually that player, as he's been braced up and strapped down, and he always does something. I remember I was at the Washington Redskins football game when Alex Smith, I'm sure you've seen the devastating injury that he had on his leg when they were carting him off the field. And he did something. They all do this. Whenever a football player is able to do it, they always raise their hand or they give a thumbs up. They always say afterwards, I did that to let my wife know I was okay, or my mom know that I was okay, or my kids know that I was okay. But they also do it to signal to their team and to the fans in the stadium and watching at home that I'm okay. Now fight on without me. I'm okay. Let's win this game. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Get your head back in the game and keep playing and fight to win. The only difference here is that our quarterback, our head coach, our star player, was taken off the field for his own safety at that moment when he sent us that signal, but he's right back in the lineup. He's not going on injured reserve. That was not a career-ending injury. That was a career-defining moment. It was a nation-defining moment. One of the amazing stories that I followed over the weekend on social media was a lot of people who were either wishy-washy Republicans, either never Trumpers, Nikki Haley fans, why do we have to have the mean tweets kind of Republicans who were maybe, either on the fence or they had reluctantly agreed that it's all right, fine, on election day, I'll vote for Trump because I can't vote for Biden and I can't vote for Kennedy. but I'm not happy about it. And I'm certainly not going to talk about it. I'm not going to be public about it. I'm just going to ignore politics and I'm going to continue to criticize Trump until election day. Sure, he's got my vote, but that's about it. And those people were absolutely radicalized by this moment. Did you see this too in your life? Did you see this on your social media pages? People who said, listen, I wasn't sure about Trump and I wish he were different and kinder and whatever the objections are. But after seeing him get up, show that grit, that toughness, that spirit, that American leadership, well, that's what I want in a president. So count me in 100%. I saw people saying, I'm going to go and knock on doors for this guy. People who were completely checked out of this election cycle. You know, all the people who like to cynically be above the mess, who say, oh, you know, what's the sign? Oh, I'm rooting for a apocalyptic asteroid in 2024. That's the only way we get out of this. Yeah, go ahead and wish for that. That's not really the choice we have. Get in the game. Be a grown-up. Make a decision. And what they saw Saturday helped them make that decision. It's moments like this when a leader steps up and does something. I compared it to George W. Bush getting on the rubble on September 11th and grabbing that bullhorn. And, you know, presidents and candidates, politicians, they're so scripted all the time. They're constantly handled by people who make a ton of money telling them how they should pose and how they should look and what they should say, literally what they should say, writing their speeches for them. And the failures, the awful ones, the terrible ones, when a spontaneous moment happens, when they have to show leadership and there's no one there to handle them and no one there to polish them and no one there to give them the words that they're supposed to say, they fall on their face or they fall off their bicycle. And the great leaders seize the moment, rise to the moment, fill the moment. Great leaders. Well, great leaders do this. And you can't teach it. You can't script it. You can't handle it. You can't manage it. At a moment when America needs a message of strength and a message of perseverance and a message of hope, and yeah, a message of defiance, knowing what we've been through, knowing what we're up against. At that moment, a man who was just shot in the head, well, he rose to the occasion, didn't he? He met the moment. And after 3.5 years of a president who never fails to miss the moment, to say exactly the wrong thing, it was like being in a desert for a month and then finally getting a pitcher of ice water. It was like, thank you. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what our country needs. I saw more stories of people over the weekend. One guy in San Francisco, seeing people walking around downtown San Francisco wearing MAGA hats. I saw somebody tweet out from Boston Harbor. You know, these are bastions of liberal Democrat ideology and one party thinking. And in Boston Harbor, somebody outside their home was flying a Trump 2024 flag. People coming out of the closet, as it were, as Trump supporters, proudly proclaiming it, saying it, you know what, if this guy can take a bullet and stand up and project this kind of strength, this kind of hope, then I can at least come forward and say, I'm going to vote for him. It shouldn't be that hard. And that's what we saw over and over and over again. Look at this one. This was my favorite one. It's gone viral. I don't know who Stephanie Tyler is. But this is how she describes herself. Graduated in 2012 with a degree in women's studies. So you can sort of see the pattern here. Cried in 2016 when Trump got elected, lost touch with Democrats somewhere around Me Too, discovered entrepreneurship, updated voter registration in 2018, but didn't tell anyone, told myself I was a single issue voting centrist. The last 6 to 12 months, I believed I was going to abstain from voting in the upcoming election because the options are equally terrible. But watching Trump survive an assassination attempt and act like a total fucking savage just shifted me into some strange patriotic gear that my fancy feminism, white men, bad infected brain never showed me. Like the dude took a bullet and stood up with blood dripping down his face and rallied a fucking crowd while fist pumping, yelling, fight. Sorry, but I'm voting for that. And saying it out loud feels so freeing. 2012 Stephanie would be so pissed, but that's okay because 2012 Stephanie didn't know shit. That's Stephanie Tyler, whoever she is. That's where we are right now in this country. Something changed. Something big changed. And isn't it ironic? Isn't it ironic that this evil madman, this demonically motivated lost soul who believed all of the rhetoric, believed all the lies, he thought he was doing something so great. He thought with his bullet he would save the country and save the world from the next Hitler. And he would end MAGA. He would end conservatism. He would stop the Republican Party in its tracks. That's what he thought he was going to do. And that one bullet actually did the complete opposite. It made Trump stronger. It made us stronger. It made us more united than ever. And it made us emboldened against the scum that he represents. This is now, if it wasn't already, this is now what I like to call a broken glass election. A broken glass election is when one side of the political equation, one side of the ticket, is willing to walk across broken glass to cast their ballot. But this is beyond that. This is a broken glass election in that people are now willing to walk across broken glass to get their friends registered to vote, to knock on doors of strangers and say, we got to do this. Isn't it ironic that that evil fuck who wanted to explode Donald Trump's brain and devastate all of us, isn't it ironic that he ended up actually doing the exact opposite? Out of what was a horrific moment in all of our lives where we all held our breath, we all began to feel every piece of dread and horrible emotion that we could think of when we saw Donald Trump reach up and grab his head and drop to the ground. In those seconds where we were waiting for the next step, we were waiting to see what had happened. We were waiting to see the worst. And instead, we saw the best. You talk about an emotional ride that we all went on together. And now this is where we're going to be together now. No matter what happens, no matter what they throw at us, and you know they're ready to throw a lot. They're not going to stop. Their grasp on power is too important to them. Their fear of losing that power is so important to them that they will not stop between now and election day. But no matter what they throw at us, no matter what they say, no matter what they do, no matter what they attempt, we will all be here. We will all be right here together. That's the key. And we will continue, as President Trump said, to fight. 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 It's all good. We got this. Hey, real fast. Can your savings withstand an economic storm? There's no easy way to transition. Think about what you put away for the future. Inflation can render cash worthless. Sorry. Real estate can crash like it did in 2008. Economies built on a mountain of debt can fall like a house of cards. There are very few physical assets you can invest in that can stand the test of time. Gold has withstood as a valued form of money for millennia. It's why people are flocking to it right now and why Birch Gold is busier than ever. Through a little-known tax loophole, Birch Gold lets you convert a retirement account into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. The best part is it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. To learn more, text Larry to 989898. Claim your free info kit on gold. Let me ask you again, can your IRA or 401k weather an economic storm? And if not, call the people I trust. Birch Gold. Text Larry to 989898 and secure your savings today. Whew. So I don't know where you were. I was actually out spending time in central rural Virginia with my wife, my child, and some very dear friends of mine, including Matt and Mercedes Schlapp. Now, you may know them. Matt runs the American Conservative Union, which is the group that puts on the CPAC conference. Mercedes, of course, is a television figure. She's on Newsmax all the time now. She used to work in the Trump White House. Both Matt and Mercedes are sort of, in that Trump inner circle, in that they don't work for the campaign, but they're very closely connected to the campaign. And we were all together with a couple of other dear friends of ours having a dinner. Or we were preparing dinner, actually, when all of this happened. And after some prayers, Matt and Mercedes said that they knew firsthand. In fact, Matt's been saying this since the last CPAC conference in February when President Trump gave a speech in D.C., in National Harbor in D.C., that the Trump campaign and the Trump family have been complaining about the lack of Secret Service attention, that they've been asking for more protection. They've been asking for a larger detail. They've been saying that there are problems, that the detail that they have is overworked, that they're spread thin, and they need more personnel. And the Secretary Mayorkas of Homeland Security under the Biden administration has denied them at every turn. And this matches their absolutely horrific and almost criminal denial of Secret Service protection for Robert Kennedy Jr. The Secret Service, Homeland Security, the Biden administration, they keep saying, well, President Trump is getting the same kind of security that any candidate would get, which is absolute and total bullshit. Because Donald Trump needs a little bit more than what any other candidate would get. I'm sorry. He's not Lamar Alexander from 2008. Wait, 1998, 1996. God, I'm dating myself. He's not, I don't know why Lamar Alexander is the first name I could pick. Okay, let me try another one. He's not Mike Huckabee from 2000. Okay? That's not who we're dealing with here. That wasn't 2000. Jesus. Sorry, it's been an emotional 48 hours. The point is, Donald Trump is not just any other presidential candidate. He's been vilified internationally, worldwide, as an existential threat. He's been vilified by the president of the United States. Also, he's not just a presidential candidate, he's a former president. Both of those things combined, you would think, would add to the Secret Service protections. Also, unlike this president who campaigns in a basement, he campaigns with giant rallies with thousands and thousands of people that turn up for it. This requires more security. You don't just do a cookie cut. Oh, hey, thanks for shopping at Secret Service R Us. You're a presidential candidate. Oh, here's our package. That's what you get. Bye-bye now. Enjoy. No, that's not how you do security to protect a person from assassination. You know how I know that? Because in 2008, I assure you, Barack Obama got a lot more Secret Service protection and a bigger detail than John McCain got as the Republican nominee. Because Barack Obama did rallies in front of 50,000 people. So knowing from my friends who are connected to the inner circle, knowing that there have been frequently denied requests for extra Secret Service detail, it calls so many things into question about what happened. This should have never happened. This was an absolute disgrace. The fact that the head of the Secret Service, this woman, we'll get to her in a minute, has not resigned. And how do you not see this as an abject failure? The Secret Service literally has one job. Oh, I know they're responsible for other things too. But no. When push comes to shove, they have one job, or they certainly should have one job. And that is to provide security and protect the president, the vice president, and other people that get Secret Service protection. That's it. Protect them. And you make sure that things like this don't happen. And when a thing like this does happen, whoever's in charge should resign in disgrace. Sean Davis of The Federalist reported this the evening of the assassination attempt. A source familiar with Trump's security detail tells The Federalist that the former and future president's detail has been asking for beefed up protection and resources for weeks, but has been rebuffed time and again by Biden's DHS. Alejandro Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security. He's also in charge of the border. Hell of a job, Alejandro. DHS, which oversees Secret Service protective detail, wasn't responsive to those requests for more resources, the source said. Was Biden's regime behind the attack, or did it deliberately do everything it could to allow it to happen? Developing. And of course, everyone in the media, left-wing pundits will say, how dare you? How dare you so suggest that they wanted this to happen, that this was an inside job, that they were... Here's the thing. If you provide the appropriate amount of security that the campaign is asking for because of very real, viable threats to the candidate, if you do your job, then no one even needs to ask those questions. But your behavior invites this kind of scrutiny. Dan Bongino, our colleague on across conservative media and multiple platforms, certainly here on Rumble, if you're watching on Rumble, and a colleague on my radio network. He appeared. He's a former Secret Service agent. He appeared with Jesse Waters last night. Take a look.
Former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino joins me now. Is this gross incompetence, or is it something even more scary that we can't even think about?
No, it's gross incompetence. I mean, how do you think about it, right? The counter sniper team, they train out, the Secret Service counter sniper team, obviously they're to mitigate a sniper threat. They train out to 1,000 yards. So we're talking about, say it was 200 yards. It was actually less than that where this shooter was, right? You're talking about a fraction of what they're trained at. They're also trained to spot guys in ghillie suits, cracked open windows.
Right.
He's on a white roof in broad daylight.
He's on a white roof.
Now, again, it'd be easy for me to say, oh, well, let's not get into Monday morning quarterbacking. Bro, it's not a freaking football game. It's the president of the United States' life. The Secret Service has one job. Well, outside of counterfeiting and protection, it is one job. You keep the body alive no matter what. They came within a millimeter of this guy losing his life. I don't understand some of the commentary that's, they did a great job. Well, the body guys, that response was, brave. They ran up there. They didn't know there could have been 10 more shooters.
Right.
No doubt. Know those guys. Pretty heroic what happened there. But the security failure in the perimeter is a complete, total debacle. No one should defend this.
So when you have guys, we just played the sound, when you have fans saying, hey, there's a guy with a gun over there, to multiple law enforcement guys, and they still are just looking around like this and no one. How does that happen?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm getting from a number of sources that people are feeding to me their information, obviously, because they want to fix it. They're concerned, and I think you're going to see a lot of whistleblowers. I'm hearing there were very, very few. I don't want to give an exact number, but very few actual, I don't think anyone else has reported this, actual Secret Service poststanders at that site. That they were temp HSI,
Right.
Homeland Security folks, which they're great folks. I'm not knocking them, but that's not what they do specifically. We do protection and we're trained for that. So I'm hearing that. I'm also hearing that the counter sniper team, that they had a problem seeing over the elevation. That's why I didn't engage right away.
Oh, come on.
But that's not the problem. The problem, well, it's the problem, but that's not the real. The problem is, where the hell was the aerial visual support? Why was there no helicopter? Why was there no drone? Why was there no FLIR? Why was there no thermal, forward-looking infrared? How the hell is the crowd acting as the freaking counter surveillance operation?
I know, if that's the best asset you have is random Trump supporters telling police that there's a guy with a gun, what technology are they deploying? They're bragging about they have all this new technology. I didn't see it. Tell me about when they rush him over to the van, I guess, the vehicle. It seemed like some of the Secret Service agents, I just don't know if they had the stature that I would expect to see and the gravitas that I would expect to see protecting the former president.
Well, the rule is maximum to the protectee, minimum to the problem, right? Because you don't know how many problems there are. So if you try to rush to one problem, like the Malcolm X shooting, and there's another problem over there, you're going to wind up getting dead quick. So they did the right thing by rushing to the protectee. On the evac out, yeah, you do see a couple of agents who one couldn't reholster the weapon and things like this. So, yeah, there were some definite.
And the other one was like 5'4".
Yeah, I mean, you're going to find out in the coming weeks that the physical fitness standards for men and women are different. That's weird because the protectee's weight and height doesn't change for a man or a woman.
Does Cheadle get fired anytime soon?
She needs to go immediately. She has disgraced the Secret Service multiple times. She needs to go. She needs to be fired ASAP, but Mayorkas doesn't have the cojones to do it.
Yeah, she won't be fired. She won't be fired because Mayorkas doesn't have the cojones, and certainly Biden doesn't have the cojones. If he didn't fire anybody after the withdrawal of Afghanistan, they're not going to fire her. More on her in just a moment, but you heard mention of the witnesses, the people who were there supporting President Trump, who were in the crowd, and what they saw and what they said to police officers. Let's take a look at some of those reports and why what they saw and what they reported. You know, see something, say something, see something, say something, see something, say something died in Butler, Pennsylvania, because people saw something and they said something. And somehow the law enforcement officers who heard, hey, there's a guy on the roof. We think he's got a gun. In fact, we see it. It's definitely a gun. At that moment, they couldn't communicate to the Secret Service about what was going on to mitigate this and to stop it. What the hell is that all about? And again, it appears that it's because Secret Service had such a small complement at this rally that they had to rely so heavily on local law enforcement, and they had different frequencies, different communications, and nobody could talk to each other about the obvious threat that was there. So let's take a look at what those witnesses saw and what they said.
Just take me back. What were you doing before the shooting happened? And then what did you see and hear?
I was just hanging, standing there like everybody else, waiting for Trump. And as Trump started, I noticed two officers that were looking for something or somebody. I was looking around myself and seeing a guy on top of one of the buildings go in between one building to the next, and went and told the officer that he was up there. And when I went back to my spot, I heard that people could still see the person from where they were standing. So I checked that out, and I went back to tell the officer that if he came over there, he could see them. And when I turned my back is when the shots started. And then it took me a second or two to figure out exactly what it was. And then it was just getting out of there and helping some other person out with her child. And we got out, and that was the end of that. And I went and left, and that was all.
All right, a little bit more. I do love just everyday Americans who were part of this historic moment telling what they saw and what they did. These are all the redneck fascist rubes that Joe Biden looks down his nose at. They were there, they saw it, and they said, here's BBC.
Someone who was here. You weren't inside the event, nope, but you were just outside. Tell us what you saw. So we had a party here all day. You can see behind us at the Brinkles Farming Greenhouse here. We had a party. And we all decided, hey, you know, when we hear Trump up there, we're going to walk up through the field, stand by the trees up there under the shade, and watch and listen to the rally, right? We couldn't see him, but we could hear him. So we walked up, and probably 5 to 7 minutes of Trump speaking. I'm estimating here. I have no idea, you know. But we noticed a guy crawling, bear crawling up the roof of the building beside us, 50 feet away from us. So we're standing there, and, you know, we're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle. We could clearly see him with a rifle. Absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police were like, oh, what? You know, like they didn't know what was going on. You know, we're like, hey, right here on the roof. We can see him from right here. We see him. You know, he's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for, 2 or 3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots rang out.
So you're certain that the shots came from that guy on the roof?
100%. 100%.
And he was up there for a couple of minutes.
He was up there.
You were up there for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. At least 3 to 4 minutes.
And you were telling the police and the Secret Service?
We were telling the police. We were pointing at them for the Secret Service, who were looking at us from the top of the barn. They were looking at us the whole time when we were standing by that tree.
Could they see
binoculars?
Could they see him?
Probably not, because the roof, the way the slope went, he was behind where they could see. But why is there not Secret Service on all of these roofs here? I mean,
that's the question. Because I know everybody's saying, well, of course, the sniper couldn't take him out because it was on the downslide of the slope of the roof. And again, no expert here. I'm not a former Secret Service agent like Dan Bongino, but I don't think you need to be one. If you had sent any sentient American adult to this rally space and said, imagine the worst thing possible, imagine how an assassination could take place here, what parts of this area would you want covered and cleared and monitored at all times? And you would think that roof would be one of those things. I think most people would look at it and say, well, this is the closest roof that someone could be on to take a sniper shot at. And if the Secret Service snipers are right here and they can't see the backside of the roof, then you should probably have somebody over here monitoring the roof. You can't put him in a credit back. No, I don't think it takes an expert. But most disconcerting about this is the fact that gentleman with a remarkable head of hair and other people on the ground there saw it happening, so much so that they could take videos of what was happening and notified law enforcement, and still no response. Have you seen this video?
He was doing the job. I wouldn't even be doing this. I think it's a beautiful place.
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there.
All right, now I want to go back so you can get a lay of the land here. But there's the roof right there. And this is a great, because everyone's looking at the overhead shot. And they're saying, oh, it's, what are they, 130 yards, I think they're saying, or such. And everyone's like, oh, it's hard to really grasp how close this is. Take a look at the beginning of this video again. But that's the building. That's the dude right there crawling up to the roof. And it's a very slight slope, right? All right. Now look again at the beginning of this video. All right. He's got a shot of this big widescreen. You see this big black pole here? That's what the American flag behind Donald Trump is suspended from. So as he starts to pan to the left here, you can see, there's the flag, which is just above the stage. So see where the O in opportunity is? That's basically where the stage is and where Trump is speaking. All right. And now you just pan to the left a little bit. And there's the building, like the first building in front and to the side of where the president is speaking. The very first building. And did you see how close it was? There's the flag. There's the stage. And he's right there. All right, so let's watch the video continue.
There he is right there. Right there, see him? He's laying down, you see him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
And Scott, I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a Senate.
What's happening?
And to make sure we take back the White House, because if we do, we're going to make America better than ever before. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look.
And
There he
it's
is.
not easy, because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people, criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here.
Right on the roof.
It's much tougher than it happens.
You went right on the roof, big guy.
He was doing.
All right, so you've seen that video, or if you haven't seen it, that's a pretty great example of not only the distance and proximity and the threat, but the fact that so many people saw it. They weren't even watching Trump. They were watching this guy and saying, "Officer, officer, officer." Now, I want you to watch this same video in a side-by-side with the president speaking.
He was doing his job. I wouldn't even be doing this. It's a beautiful place with the gorgeous ocean.
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there. Right there, see him? He's laying down, you see him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
And Scott, I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a Senate.
What's happening?
And to make sure we take back the White House, because if we do, we're going to make America better than ever before. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look.
And it's
There he
not
is.
easy, because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people, criminals. We have criminals.
He's
We
on
have
the roof. He's
drug
right
dealers. We have people that
Right
should not be
here,
here.
right on the
And
roof.
it's much tougher than it happens.
You went right on the roof, big guy.
Ever. In recorded history, we had the best border. In fact, if they could ever put up a chart, I don't know if they can do it. Do you guys have access to that chart that I love so much? You don't mind if I go off teleprompter, do you? Because these teleprompters are so damn boring. I try and explain that. Oh, there's it. Wow. You guys are doing it. They're getting better with time. My guys, take a look at that chart. Take a look at the arrow on the bottom. See the big red arrow, right? So that's when I left office. That was the lowest point, and that comes right from the government services, comes right out of Border Patrol. Take a look at that. So that arrow is the lowest amount of illegal immigration ever in recorded history into our country. And then
Now, we're going to pause it here just for a second and keep it running. But I think that, you see what's happening here in terms of the scrutiny of law enforcement and Secret Service at this event. We're now almost a minute and 45 from the moment in that video where people said, hey, look at everyone pointing at this guy over on the roof. The guy was actually noticed before the video began. So you can pad this up another 30, maybe 60 seconds, right? But here we are a minute 45 into this. From the moment the people in that video that we just looked at saw the guy crawling on the roof with the gun, and still nothing, still nothing, still nothing. Now we're going to keep it rolling here because you know what's coming.
And then the worst president in the history of our country took over. And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that says,
I hope he's turning this way. Be careful, guys.
We got breaking news. We got breaking news coming in. Shots fired. Seems to be shots fired at the Trump rally. Is he okay? are live right now at the Trump rally.
One shot right here, Mike.
We don't know if President Trump has been shot. We know he hit the ground. We do not know if President Trump has been shot. He's up. He's up. Shots are still continuing to be fired. He's giving a thumbs up, everybody. He's giving a thumbs up.
Incredible mashup, by the way, done, and it's tagged here with Milk Bar TV. I saw it on the Patrick Bet David, Patrick Bet David account on X, and it's phenomenal and it's incredibly telling. And you wonder why questions are being asked right now. You wonder why answers aren't being demanded right now. To say that it's a failure is an understatement. Obviously, it's a failure. Somebody shot at and came this close to murdering the former president and the Republican nominee for president. Failure doesn't begin to describe what happened here. And what is the point of all the security? What is the point of the perimeters? What are the, I don't know about you. Have you ever gone to a Trump rally? Have you ever gone to a speech? All of the security protocols that you have to go through. And what exactly are they doing here if, number one, they don't cover that building, and number two, when people see a suspicious man crawling on a rooftop where he shouldn't be with a gun and nobody does anything until after the shots ring out? What are we doing here? What's the point? Now, there are reports. Well, there's two reports from this morning. One is that the Secret Service did not clear that building, that they relied on local law enforcement to do it. And by the way, if that's the case, and if that's protocol, fine. Maybe have a line of communications open at all times between Secret Service and the people on the ground monitoring it. So when a cop sees something, they can say, hey, we got somebody on the roof, take them out. But apparently that can't be done, because that leads us to this second story. One local police officer climbed to the roof, encountered the attempted assassin, who pointed his rifle at the officer. The officer retreated down the ladder, and then the shots were fired. That's when Secret Service snipers shot at him. And there's another aspect of this story that you saw alluded to in the Jesse Waters interview with Dan Bongino, and that is the response of the agents after shots rang out. Now, listen, it was absolutely stirring and incredible to see those agents doing their job. They jumped on the president and surrounded him to get him to his evacuation vehicle, knowing full well that they could be next, that they could be shot, that they could be murdered. This is incredible bravery. This is what the Secret Service does, and they should be applauded for it. Just an incredible instant response from those agents right there, the body detail, right? Amazing. Because they don't know how many shooters there are. They don't know what's happening. All they know is one thing: get your body on top of the protectee. And if that means that you're in the line of fire, so be it. That's your job. That's amazing. Now come the questions. Transcript of what happened at the time. You'll see 1811, Trump touches right side of his face. The 1811-35, Trump takes cover as agents rush to the podium. Male agent 1, get down, get down. More shots heard as Trump surrounded by agents. 1811-41, female agent. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? Man yelling, gunshot, woman screams. Male agent, go around to the spare, go around to the spare. I think that means the vehicle, the evac vehicle. What are we doing? What are we doing from the female agent? We actually have the moment that we're talking about here that's in that transcript with captions and the audio. Take a listen. Kudos to the team at Jesse Waters Show there at Fox.
This lady wasn't prepared, and the Secret Service isn't answering any questions.
That's right. I mean, again, amazing. All of these agents, including this woman, doing her job to jump in there and be a protectorate and be a body willing to take a bullet. But when you're in that moment and the only thing coming out of your mouth is, what are we doing? What are we doing? Where do we go? It suggests that maybe you're not trained to the full extent that you should be trained. Right? Because that's the only voice we heard asking those questions. And there's more. I'm sure you've seen this video. But once they got the president to his evacuation vehicle, this was the scene. Now, again, I want to at least take a moment and acknowledge that this is a chaotic scene and a chaotic situation. But it's also the type of situation that these men and women train for. To be able to keep the president protected and get him out of there as soon as possible. And we don't know what everybody's role and responsibility here is. And again, they know that they took care of the one shooter, but they still don't know everything. They don't know if there's somebody in the crowd who's supposed to follow up and try to get there. This is still a dangerous situation. And I can tell you this, from watching the Secret Service, going all the way back to the last time there was an attempted assassination of a president, it was Ronald Reagan, and it was 40 years ago. There's a lot of things going on. There are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of different responsibilities, and everybody's got a different job. But I can tell you that when you're in the Secret Service, you all have one job. While you're doing your other tasks, you have one other job, and that is to present the image of calm, control, and responsibility. That this is your job and you are professional, and it may be a chaotic situation, but you are not in a chaotic state. And that's not what we see here. Not from those three agents. In fact, they're projecting a level of chaos, which is, well, disconcerting to say the least. What do we know about the woman who's in charge of the Secret Service? Well, we know she used to be on Vice President Biden's detail. She protected Joe Biden when he was vice president. Then when Mike Pence became vice president, she left the Secret Service and took a corporate job as the head of security for PepsiCo. And then President Biden brought her back after he won the election to run the Secret Service. Recently, CBS News did a profile of her, and she explained what her task was as the first woman in charge of the Secret Service, what her full focus and responsibility would be.
To expand hiring, they're aiming to have 30% women recruits by 2030, and even allowed YouTube influencer Michelle Carre to train with agents.
But I'm very conscious as I sit in this chair now of making sure that we need to attract diverse candidates and ensure that we are developing and giving opportunities to everybody in our workforce, and particularly women.
To expand hiring.
So her main responsibility is to make sure that she's expanding opportunities for the workforce, which is, I guess, very laudable, and maybe is what she excelled at Pepsi. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Maybe, I'm just sort of a dinosaur, and I'm thinking of things in the, back in the Reagan era. As I mentioned, Reagan was the last president where there was an attempted assassination. But it seems to me that when you take over the Secret Service, the United States Secret Service, when articulating what your main focus is, it shouldn't be to opening up a diverse workforce with opportunities for everyone. I think your main focus should be protecting the president. and protecting the vice president. And every single decision you make needs to be shot through that filter, that lens. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Now, does this make us better equipped to keep the president alive? Does this make us better capable of making sure that there isn't an assassination attempt on a candidate for president? And if it doesn't pass that test, maybe you set it aside. I don't know if you've been following the news with the Secret Service, but I live in Washington, D.C. I cover the news here on my on this show and on my morning talk show. There was recently an incident at Joint Base Andrews. That used to be called Andrews Air Force Base. It's the Air Force Base where the president and vice president and other major dignitaries in federal government fly out of. They don't use the airports here. No, they fly out on Air Force One, Air Force Two, Air Force. They call everything else other than Air Force One just one of those United States planes that the Secretary of State will fly out on or the Vice President will fly out on. A lot of air traffic over at Andrews. There's also a lot of Secret Service there as there's various shifts going here and there and to and fro from the White House to other various parts of the federal government. Well, a Secret Service agent at Air Force Andrews, Joint Base Andrews, had a nervous breakdown a couple of months ago. Got into a physical altercation with other Secret Service agents. It had to be subdued and restrained. They claimed that it was a medical incident of some sort. It even involved this woman. It was a female Secret Service agent unholstering her weapon and throwing, well, there's reports of her throwing feminine products and things. This is someone on Kamala Harris's detail, by the way. There's story after story after story of things going on in the Secret Service right now under this woman's watch where there is discontent. In fact, check this story out. If you look at the date, it's from Jennifer Jacobs of Bloomberg News, those crazy right-wingers over there at Bloomberg. This is dated May 9th, over 2 months ago. There's a petition circulating inside the U.S. Secret Service that flags concerns about, quote, a number of recent Secret Service incidents indicative of inadequate training, unquote, a double standard in disciplinary actions, and a vulnerability, quote, to potential insider threats, unquote. Insider threats that could pose a risk to U.S. national security. It was first shared Monday, I'm told, and has 39 signatures so far. Aim is to call for a congressional investigation, the petition says. That's from May 9th. And, well, they have their congressional investigation because Congressman Mike Waltz of the Armed Services Committee in the House of Representatives said that this Monday, after the Republican convention, they will be holding hearings on the Secret Service, and they've asked Ms. Cheadle to testify if she's still employed at that time. But this was May 9th, and this was reported by Bloomberg News, and it was about discontent and problems in the Secret Service that says that there is potential insider threats. Now, this is the first you're hearing about it. First I heard about it when it was pointed out over the weekend as well after this incident. Now ask yourself, knowing what we know now and what happened, do you wonder how many reporters the New York Times put on this story when it was revealed on May 9th? How many reporters do you think covered this from the Washington Bureau for the New York Times? I'm thinking none. And do you know why? Because the New York Times had to assign all of their investigative reporters to the really important story regarding Justice Alito's wife's spat with her neighbors in Alexandria, Virginia, and whether she put out a historic flag in front of her house or flew an American flag upside down as a signal of distress. How many reporters did the New York Times have on the story of Samuel Alito's wife getting into a fight with her neighbor and flying an appeal to heaven flag versus the reporters they didn't assign to a complete and total breakdown at the U.S. Secret Service? There are lots of questions that still have to be asked and answered by the Secret Service. This is just scratching the surface. But knowing everything that we've just learned about what happened the afternoon of the 13th, what happened in the build up to it, and all of these other stories now we're learning about the emphasis on a diverse workforce instead of actually a competent and thoroughly badass force of agents who are just there for one reason and one reason only, not to represent a gender or represent a race, but to protect this nation's leaders. I can tell you the Secret Service will be first on the list of the new president's agenda to fix what's broken in Washington. We're glad you watch this show, trust me, and I'm glad that you come here to get your news and information. But if you also watch cable news and you like to check in on Joe and Mika at MSNBC to see what they have to say, well, you woke up very disappointed this morning because MSNBC pulled them, yanked them, took them off the air. They didn't want Joe and Mika to be on this important historic news day. That's fascinating, isn't it? Now, I want to get into the details of why they made that decision and other things that the media had to say after the assassination attempt. But first, a quick look down memory lane. We don't have to go too far. It was only a couple of weeks ago when Joe Scarborough conducted this little brief monologue on the very same show we're discussing, Morning Joe, MSNBC.
And if he is voted into office, then a lot of these people that are talking about literal or figurative or whatever the hell they're saying, you're going to look like idiots because he will get away with, he will imprison, he will execute whoever he's allowed to imprison, execute, drive from the country. Just look at his past. It's not really hard to read. The only thing that stood between him and the destruction of American democracy was the federal judiciary.
Now, that was Joe Scarborough, again, just a couple of weeks ago, telling you that Donald Trump will imprison and execute people who get in his way should he win the election. And hey, he's a celebrated thought leader on the political left. He is the darling of the elites in Manhattan and Washington, D.C. They can't get enough of Joe and Mika. No reprimand, no tut-tut, no, oh, we must do better than this as a nation. That's the kind of language we've heard over and over and over again. I want to compare that flashback to this flashback. This is Tucker Carlson, whose opinions and journalistic endeavors were too radical for Fox News. He had to go, but honestly, I think he's a much happier man now as he's flown his own shingle there on the X platform and also on Tucker Carlson Network. It was earlier this year that Tucker Carlson made this commentary.
You know, they protested him. They called him names. He won anyway. They impeached him twice on ridiculous pretenses. They fabricated a lot about what happened on January 6th in order to impeach him again. It didn't work. He came back. Then they indicted him. It didn't work. He became more popular. Then they indicted him 3 more times. And every single time his popularity rose. So if you begin with criticism, then you go to protest, then you go to impeachment, now you go to indictment, and none of them work, what's next? I mean, graph it out, man. We're speeding toward assassination, obviously, and no one will say that, but I don't know how you can reach that conclusion. You know what I mean? Like, they have decided, permanent Washington, both parties have decided that there's something about Trump that's so threatening to them, they just can't have him.
So that's Tucker Carlson months ago saying we are speeding toward an assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Now, I play you those 2 flashbacks because only one of them got headlines written about it in the New York Times and in other journalistic endeavors from the political left in this country. Both of those people predicted death and destruction in the future. One of them, Tucker Carlson, was right. He accurately predicted that the next thing you know, there's going to be an assassination attempt against Donald Trump. And he was vilified as a conspiracy theorist and a hate monger, and this is the kind of thing that we can't stomach in America. Joe Scarborough is an employee in good standing from NBC News, Comcast Universal, where he said with a straight face to Al Sharpton, of all people, on his morning cable news television program that Donald Trump will be responsible for the incarceration and execution of American citizens should he win the election. And not a peep, not a frickin' peep about Joe Scarborough. Now, fast forward to this morning. Joe Scarborough on the record using that kind of vitriolic anti-Trump rhetoric, over the top crap like that. And he's been doing it every single day since Inauguration Day 2017. And after finally there is an assassination attempt on the president, somehow cooler heads prevail at MSNBC. CNN had the headline, Morning Joe pulled from air Monday because of Trump shooting. This, as our friend Bonchi, who writes at Red State, said, this is an admission. MSNBC pulled Joe and Mika off the air today because they were afraid of what might be said on that show in light of the assassination attempt. That's MSNBC, NBC News, Comcast Universal admitting publicly that Joe and Mika cannot be trusted, that show cannot be trusted, that this show and these two are part of the problem. They are part of what led us to a bullet hitting Donald Trump in the head on Saturday. If you look at the article, quickly, MSNBC will not air Morning Joe, its celebrated politics roundtable program on Monday, opting to instead air continued breaking news coverage of the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. The Progressive News Network confirmed the decision to preempt its influential and top-rated morning show. By the way, it's just top-rated in Manhattan and in D.C. It is not top-rated anywhere where it matters. It's not top-rated in any demographic nationally, I assure you, but that's okay. It's the elites that watch it, and that's all that matters. Confirmed the decision to preempt its influential and top-rated morning show after a CNN inquiry Sunday evening. The network said the show will resume airing Tuesday. A person familiar with the matter told CNN that the decision was made to avoid a scenario in which one of the show's stable of 24+ guests might make an inappropriate comment on live television that could be used to assail the program and network as a whole. Given the breaking news nature of the story, the person said it made more sense to continue airing rolling back news coverage in the fraught political moment. In other words, they can't trust their own show, their own guests, their own hosts to not say something that would be blood-curdling, despicable, and inappropriate in light of the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. Gee, I don't know why they have that fear. It's amazing to me that they said that this has to do with, all of the guests that they have on the roundtable. You can't control what they say. Hey, how about the guy who makes millions of dollars from you every day?
And if he is voted into office, then a lot of these people that are talking about literal or figurative or whatever the hell they're saying, you're going to look like idiots because he will get away with, he will imprison, he will execute whoever he's allowed to imprison, execute, drive from the country.
Yeah, there you go. You got to worry about all of the guests that they have on that might say volatile things. Joe and Mika are fine. Here's the funny thing. If that was the concern, it's a round table and you can't control what other people say in a breaking news event. So cooler heads should prevail. We'll just come back on Tuesday. Hey, I got an idea. Why not just do the show with Joe and Mika then? Wait, they can't handle a 2-hour show every morning where they're basically reading teleprompters and giving their opinion about the news? Forget about the roundtable. Forget about the guests. You can let Willie Geist be on there. Only paid employees of NBC News. What's wrong with that idea? Oh, I know. Hold on. I've got a brilliant idea. You're right. You can't control who these guests are and what they might say. So instead, Morning Joe today is just going to be paid employees and responsible journalists who work for MSNBC, NBC News, Comcast Universal. check your portfolios to see if you own Comcast Universal. Check your mutual funds to see if they invest in Comcast Universal. We're only going to have employees who are paid by us, who work for us, so we can control them. So this morning's Morning Joe Roundtable will include Reverend Al Sharpton and Joy Reid and Chris Hayes and Lawrence O'Donnell and Rachel Maddow. Because they're responsible. We can control them. They're not some crazy guest. No. In fact, you know what? You should just give Joy Reid the whole 2 hours. Just let it be Joe and Mika and Joy. And I'm sure nothing inappropriate will be said. You'll be fine. Oh, and to be really safe, your entire show will be that lineup, plus you can just have high-ranking Democrat politicians as your guests, because Lord knows they won't say anything inappropriate.
You got to be ready to throw a punch. You have to be ready to throw a punch.
Donald Trump, I think you need to go back and punch him in the face.
That I thought he should have punched him in the face.
I feel like punching him.
I'd like to take him behind the gym if I were in high school.
If we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
No, I wish we were in high school. I could take him behind the gym.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
Take him out now.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Please get up in the face of some Congress people.
People will do what they do.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
We're going to go in there. We're going to...
But this is just a warning to you Trumpers. Be careful. Walk lightly. And for those of you who are soldiers, make them pay.
If you had to be stuck in an elevator with either President Trump, Mike Pence, or Jeff Sessions, who would it be?
Does one of us have to come out alive?
Gosh, how did we get here? Oh, both sides need to just tamp down the rhetoric. Yeah, that would be your MSNBC show. Did you notice how often all those things were said with the little frickin' peacock in the corner? There's one right there. There's the peacock. Yeah, we're just going to take a day off. Joe and Mika, I think cooler heads will prevail. And then we'll be back tomorrow. After the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania, one man turned his ire on the media who had assembled there, and it's hard to argue with everything he had to say. If you haven't seen this, I want you to right now.
You remember when you called. This is your fault. You. This is your fault. Every last one. This is your fault. It is your fault. This is your fault. You. This is your fault. Your fault. This is your fault. You.
But now everything's changed. Now that this has happened, we're all going to just take a deep breath and we're all going to hold hands and we're going to sing Kumbaya and everything's going to be different and we're all going to be better, right? Let's go take a look at some of the people Libs of TikTok has been checking on over the weekend just to see where they're at.
I just found out about this shit. It just happened. I haven't even had a second to process. You're telling me somebody finally had the balls to bring a pew-pew, and he missed! We were a second away! We were a centimeter away from half of the problem being gone, and you missed! There was a white man attached to that trigger. I know it! We were...
I'm sorry, but you have to see this. You have to know. Because when Biden showed up in the Oval Office in his pre-recorded message, by the way, why did that have to be pre-recorded? You're talking into a teleprompter. You're incapable of going live to the American people from the Oval Office in a controlled environment. And by the way, where was the teleprompter? On the freaking ceiling fan? Did you notice he couldn't even make eye contact with the camera? What a disaster this man is. He couldn't even say ballot box. He kept saying battle box, battle box. And he sits there and wrings his hands and says, yeah, you know, both sides have been a problem here. Both sides have a problem, and that's why you all need to fix the way you talk to each other in this country. But just, you know, he wasn't talking to her. He was talking to you. It would have been amazing if Joe Biden in his address had said, and it would have been so easy for him to do this too, to say the fevered pitch of political rhetoric in this country has reached a place beyond where it should ever have gotten. And we should have all been reflecting since we saw that image of President Trump going down behind that podium. We should all be reflecting on who we are and what we've been saying. And I'm going to begin and lead by example. I want to tell the American people that I have crossed the line, that I have too often said that Donald Trump is a threat to our country and a threat to our democracy. Just recently, I said that the bullseye needs to be put on Donald Trump, and that's wrong. And I am going to lead by example. I am going to start right here, right now. It would be easy for me to point to January 6th and come up with a whole bunch of other fake news stories to say that the Republicans are actually much more violent than we are. But that would be wrong. Now is not the time to point fingers because that would make the matter worse. Instead, I'm going to look at myself in the mirror and I'm going to lead by example because I'm your president and I'm going to show the way. He didn't say. In fact, he did the exact opposite. He never mentioned anything about what he's done and what he said. He only talked about things like the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping. He never actually mentioned Steve Scalise getting shot at by a deranged left-wing lunatic years ago at that baseball field in Alexandria. There's no unity there. How did we get here? Oh, how did we get here? I don't know. Let's take a look at the last issue of the left-wing magazine New Republic. How did we get here? I tell you all the time that if they call Trump Hitler, that means they're calling you a Nazi. And what do you do with Hitler to keep him from becoming Hitler? You know what? Oh,
Hey,
we don't know what the motive is here.
I think
Sorry,
there's one interesting name there at the bottom of this magazine for someone who contributed.
Let me see. Oh,
bottom middle.
Brian Stelter.
Yeah, can you believe that?
Yes. Yes, I sure can. I'm sure that he had most of the commentary about, you know, what we do at Town Hall and about what Tucker Carlson does and talk radio, because that's the real problem, right? But there's nothing wrong with the New Republic doing this. How did we get here? I don't know how we got here. Let's take a look at the theater. Do you remember back at the New York Shakespeare Festival during the Trump's first term? They had a reimagining of Julius Caesar, but instead of an assassination of the Roman emperor, they had a blood-curdling assassination porn depiction of Donald Trump as Julius Caesar.
Actor dressed to look just like President Donald Trump as he's assassinated on stage. Look as his character is stabbed to death. And there's no mistaking the Trump connection. Check out the unbuttoned overcoat and red tie that hangs over his waist. It's a staging of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar that is outraging many. The controversial production is taking place here in New York City's Central Park. The staging is being seen as a direct jab at Trump and the controversial political climate in this country. It's an actor dressed to look just...
A jab at Trump. Get it? A jab at Trump. You know, I don't know if you know this about me. I mention it sometimes. Before I got into political commentary, and I was brought into this world by Andrew Breitbart, who thought that I could lend something to the conversation. I had a former career. I worked in the theater business as a manager. I was a manager of theater. I've seen plenty of shows at the New York Shakespeare Festival at the Delacorte in Central Park there. They usually do great work. I've seen many, many productions of Julius Caesar. I don't know if you've ever seen Julius Caesar before. It's a great play, one of Shakespeare's best. You know, they assassinate Julius Caesar, Brutus, et tu, Brute, you know, was the final knife that gets plunged in. Every single time I've seen Julius Caesar during the assassination scene, when the actor playing Julius Caesar is assassinated, murdered by the Roman senators, the audience never applauds. That's not an applause moment. When Julius Caesar is murdered before their very eyes on the Ides of March, the audience is, you know, it's a very serious moment, as you can imagine. It's certainly not something that brings cheers. This production, where Julius Caesar was depicted as Donald Trump, they cheered every night. The New York audience. This was assassination porn. They've been asking for this. They've been begging for this. They've been wanting this. They've been fantasizing about this. They've been dreaming about this. Some of them in their warped demonic way have probably been praying for this, but I don't know who they're praying to, not the God I pray to. How did we get here? Oh, how did we get here? We got here because of people like this. And we got here because the news media that has spent all of their time telling all of us that Donald Trump is Charles Manson with a red tie. And finally, when their great moment came, when that bullet passed by from a half centimeter away from Donald Trump's skull, even then, they couldn't report the news honestly. Look at the New York Times headline. Trump hurt but safe after a shooting. A shooting? It took a couple of days for some of these outlets to actually use the word assassination or assassination attempt. And do you notice this is the photo that we've been looking at all day long? It is the iconic moment. Their own photographer captured this great moment, right? Here's what we've been looking at all day. This is the defining moment of this year, of this campaign, of a generation. And do you notice that's the picture we're looking at? But if you get the New York Times, it looks like this. What's missing, guys? Hey, we got to crop this picture out. There's not enough room for everything in the picture. What do we crop out? I don't know. Let's crop out the American flag, because that's the New York Times. How did we get here? How did this country reach this point where an evil lunatic wanted to put a bullet in the brain of the leading candidate, the Republican nominee, and the person who is leading? If the election were held today, Donald Trump is president. So how did this happen? How did we get here? Oh, I don't know. Maybe this is a clue.
Most importantly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, Trump is a threat to this nation.
Most importantly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart.
Most importantly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, Trump is a threat to this nation.
And then the cheers. I don't know. When something's a threat to the nation, what should you do about it, right? In his speech from the Oval Office, President Biden said that we have disagreements, but he's going to continue to point out flaws in Donald Trump's record. And he said, and I'm sure this week at the Republican National Convention, there will be a lot of criticism of my record. It's interesting, though. I don't really have much memory of Joe Biden over the course of the last several months, or his proxies, or his campaign, or his surrogates, or his pliant friends in the media like Joe and Mika, who, did I mention, were pulled off the air this morning? I don't recall them talking about their record and promoting their ideas for our country. I don't recall them even criticizing Donald Trump's record. In fact, the last thing Joe Biden wants to talk about is his record, because then he'll have to explain inflation. He'll have to explain the border. He'll have to explain Russia and Ukraine. He'll have to explain Israel and Hamas. He'll have to explain the rise of China. He'll have to explain crime in our streets. He'll have to explain the cost of eggs and meat. He'll have to explain the supply chain problems. He'll have to explain the disaster that is his record. The last thing that Joe Biden wants to talk about is his record. All he has been talking about, and all his surrogates have been talking about, and his campaign apparatus, and his pliant pals in the media, all they've been talking about is that Donald Trump is evil, that Donald Trump is a fascist, that Donald Trump will end our democracy, that this will be the last election we ever have if Donald Trump wins in November. That's all they've been talking about.
Most importantly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, Trump is a threat to this nation.
How did we get here? And then after Donald Trump survives an assassination attempt, the president of the United States, trying desperately to look presidential, throws together a makeshift press conference, but it wasn't. It was just a statement without any question. So it wasn't a press conference by any stretch of the imagination, big boy or little boy, and delivered remarks. And this is the best this man could muster.
But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. Everybody must condemn it. Everybody. I'll keep you informed, and if I'm able to speak to Donald, I'll let you know that as well. So far, it appears he's doing well, number one. Number two, that they're thoroughly investigating what happened to anyone else in the audience. We have some reports, but not final reports.
All right. I can't stomach to finish it, but you heard at the beginning. The best that he could muster was that shooting his political opponent is not appropriate. That was the best he could do. That's the deepest well of his political rhetoric to condemn this.
But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate.
Not appropriate. You know, that kind of thing, not appropriate. Trying to blow the head off of a presidential candidate and a former president of the United States. Guys, come on. That is just not appropriate. Not appropriate? Well, thankfully, all the grown-ups in the mainstream media had their chance Sunday morning to sort of evaluate where we are as a nation and do a little circumspection, a little self-reflection, perhaps, and see if they had anything to do with this too. Again, the big question that everyone was asking and wringing their hands out in New York and Washington, D.C., how did we get to this place? Oh, how did this happen? And our friend George Stephanopoulos and Martha Raddatz on ABC News, they had an idea. They had an idea about how we got here and who we should blame.
Also, George, we have to point out, no matter who the shooter, what the shooter's motives were, no matter who the shooter is, you are going to hear conspiracy theories going forward.
No question about that. But as you point out, those statements from J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, President Trump and his supporters have contributed to this violent rhetoric as well.
Well, absolutely, George. We were just looking back this morning at some of the things that former President Trump has said. He warned last March of potential death and destruction if he were charged by the Manhattan District Attorney. Our country is being destroyed as they tell us to be peaceful. Trump in January warned of bedlam in the country if the criminal charges against him succeeded. And of course, in March, he said, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That will be the least of it. He said he was partly joking and that was taken out of context. But those are indeed his words. And you have heard it from supporters as well. And supporters are certainly in some parts angry. And let's remember January 6th. In so many ways for the campaign, January 6th will probably be in the background after yesterday's event. This is a very difficult time for this campaign. I'm sure this week in Milwaukee that President Trump will highlight this, and President Biden is going to have to figure out how to go forward with his campaign and what exactly they say.
Martha Raddatz, thanks very much. Let's bring
Yeah. Thank you to Newsbusters for that video. But yeah, that basically Donald Trump is responsible for this. Who's to blame? How did we get here? Well, if Trump hadn't said all of the things that he said in his horrible rhetoric, then no one would have tried to take a shot at him. That's professional grown-up journalism there at ABC News. Well, let's see if CNN is any better, shall we?
Donald Trump and the people around him perceive themselves to be under threat. And that's all that matters. That is not legitimate. That is wrong. You hear the screams from the audience. People are terrified. And that is the kind of atmospheres that we are going to be living with. And I don't have a good answer about how we bring it back right now.
You have to have some kind of advanced degree from a liberal arts college in the United States of America to understand the logic of what this person just said. Who is this? Juliette Kayyem, former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security. Now, understand what she's saying here. We're going to play this one more time because the dementia involved in being so singularly focused on the existential threat that Republicans and Trump supporters pose to this country, that you will evaluate people screaming as there is literally an active gunman shooting live bullets. A person was murdered in the crowd. 2 others are in the hospital. And the former president of the United States, current candidate for president, was injured with blood streaked down his face and had to be rushed off the stage by the Secret Service. And this woman said that the fear and screaming of the people in the crowd and the sentiment that Trump supporters feel like they're under attack is illegitimate, as they are literally being attacked. Listen to her again. These people are literally under fire as bullets are killed one of them in the stands. And she's saying that they have no reason to feel like they're under attack.
Donald Trump and the people around him perceive themselves to be under threat. And that's all that matters. That is not legitimate. That is wrong. You hear the screams from the audience. People are terrified. And that is the kind of atmospheres that we are going to be living with. And I don't have a good answer about how we bring it back right now.
So the atmosphere that we're living with is that people who are literally being shot at are scared and terrified and feel like they're under fire, and they're the problem for feeling that as they are being shot at, is the logic of Juliette Kayyem, former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security. By the way, that would be the same Homeland Security Department who the Secret Service falls under, and denied additional Secret Service protection for this event. So those guys are really hitting a home run right now. How did we get here? We have more examples of how we got here.
I do want to say there was one thing that when I watched the tape, I found odd because of all of the heated rhetoric. And that is that after he was hit, former President Trump got up and said, fight, fight, fight. I think what we're hearing from people is that's not the message that we want to be sending right now. We want to tamp it down.
Yeah, I just know. Jamie Gangle, an executive producer at CNN, saying that one of the problems here is the man who just got shot at in that moment and survived an assassin's bullet. He stood up and said to the crowd to encourage them that he's okay, and to tell the entire world looking at what could be a potential disastrous moment for this country and for the free world, as its potential leader could have been rendered murdered in front of everyone, an incredible moment of potential weakness. And he shows strength in standing up and punching his fist in the air saying, fight, fight. And Jamie Gangle, executive producer at CNN, says, yeah, see, that's part of the problem. This is exactly why Donald Trump got shot, because he said fight. And that's considered intellectual observations from CNN. These people are an absolute disgrace in every possible way. And yet they're celebrated, actually. Celebrated. Oh, how did we get here? Well, I'm sure CBS News is a little bit better trying to figure out how we got here. Let's see what they had to say.
And then the biggest threat that officials are telling me tonight is in the form of retaliatory violence.
Sam, that's you're taking me to exactly what I've been underscoring and is frankly very concerning in the rhetoric we are seeing at this hour already. We are seeing some Republican lawmakers come out with statements directly drawing a line between the shooter, whose name we do not know. We do not know if he's a lone actor or was somebody else, but drawing some connection to the government. We have nothing to base that on at this hour.
At this hour, leading officials within the U.S. government still don't know what transpired. And it is frankly unpatriotic at this moment to be stoking the flames when we know that we are sitting on a cauldron of tensions. We know that tensions were already high before this incident, and the counterterrorism officials and Homeland Security officials that I've spoken to in the last few hours are deeply concerned that this event will be used as a rallying cry to launch attacks against individuals associated with the Biden campaign and lead to broader domestic distress. So right now, the goals are to investigate the incident, both the perpetrator and the security failures, as well as to try to tamp down any tensions that may arise coming out of it. Now, in this country, there is the First Amendment. And what we're seeing on Twitter, while it is First Amendment protected activity, I will say again, is unpatriotic in the sense that we know that this kind of rhetoric has a nexus to violence. We saw that on January 6th. We saw that in the attack against Nancy Pelosi's husband and multiple other instances.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but the attack by Nancy Pelosi's husband was some vagrant dude, hippie. How is this? There's no evidence that this was a reaction to right wing. And by the way, I reject the premise entirely. At the exact same time, they will tell you that this assassin was in no way connected to their constant drumbeat and Joe Biden's constant drumbeat that Donald Trump is an existential threat to our country. How dare you connect those dots? But then they immediately connect dots between the potential retaliatory violence that will come from those right-wingers because, you know, that's who they are and that's what they do. Hey, did you notice that nobody's rioted in the last 48 hours? Did you notice that? Have you noticed that there haven't been any, marches and demonstrations and riots and looting and arson in any of our cities? This imaginary right-wing retaliation that we're all supposed to be so concerned about. But I got to say, NBC News, as always, they take the cake. Jen Psaki, former employee of the White House, used to pay her salary. And while you were paying her salary, she was negotiating a bigger salary from Meet the Press and NBC News. Jen Psaki, after an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, expresses to the world who she's most concerned about right now.
For anyone out there who has a platform, who thinks the moment right now is to be political and attack the other party, you are feeding into the danger. You are making it more likely there's retaliation. I'm incredibly scared. I'm scared for journalists. I'm scared for people who have public platforms of all parties. And that's how people should feel.
Jen Psaki's scared for journalists. That's who we should be really worried about. She's scared for journalists and people with platforms. You have to have some sort of warped hatred of Donald Trump and his supporters to watch this horrific assassination attempt and the murder of a Trump supporter in the stands and the grave injuries to two other Trump supporters who are in the hospital. To see the man who is running for president have to be shuffled off stage with blood streaking down his face a half an inch away from being murdered. And for your key takeaway to be, seeing all of this, I'm worried most about journalists and how this might affect them. And it's been said before, I will say it again. You do not hate these people nearly enough because they obviously hate you. One other item here as we began this segment explaining how poor Joe and Mika were pulled off the air because we couldn't really count on they or their panel not saying something so atrocious and so horrific that NBC News might look bad, as if they don't look bad enough. Even though Joe and Mika were taken off the air, the ladies of The View were allowed to go up and express their opinions on this historic day, and they did not disappoint. Are you ready? One last little message from the left so that you know exactly where we all stand.
Has to do that. And I also need to say, I hope that at some point in this country, we do have a conversation about what is happening, because we can't just react when it is our side. What was this again? It was, a 20-year-old lone wolf, white, whack job with easy access to a gun. And we have to have a conversation about that, because it wasn't a drag queen. It wasn't an immigrant. It wasn't a pissed off liberal woman. This keeps happening. And we need to react, not as left or right, not as Republicans or Democrats. We need to react as Americans. And we need to ask better.
Okay, I just want to add that the shooter, yes, he was a 20-year-old kitchen worker from nearby Bethel Park in Pennsylvania. According to a CNN report, a senior law enforcement official said that he bought 50 rounds of ammunition from a local gun store hours before the rally. Shouldn't that have been reported? Somebody buys a 20-year-old white guy? I mean, we've seen that many times now, young white men with guns, and nobody reported that he bought 50 rounds of ammunition?
Well, there's also a post-mortem, as Alyssa said.
God, they are just so ignorant. There really is. And 50 rounds? What does he need 50 rounds for? Nobody buys 50 rounds. Everyone knows that when you go to the gun range to say, stay up to speed on your handling of your firearm, you only fire off 10 rounds at a time. And that's it. One magazine worth, and you're done for the day, mister. That way you get 5 days worth at the fire. They literally know nothing about the majority of people who live in this country. 50. How can someone buy 50 rounds and have it not be reported? And she gets paid 7 figures to do that. This is an ABC News show. But to the ladies of The View, the key takeaway from Saturday is that white men shouldn't have guns. If we just take the guns away from white men, everything would be fine. And what did Anna Navarro say there at the very beginning of that brilliant observation?
And I also need to say,
yeah, that's what I was looking for. No, Anna, you don't need to say it. You really don't. And even more importantly, we don't need to hear it. We could literally go on for another hour showing you the lunatic left-wing reaction to this and everything they've been saying for the months leading up to this. We literally could do that, but we are way over time. In fact, this may be our longest program ever. And I don't want to leave with that. I want to leave where we started. What happened Saturday, it changed all of us. And I want to remind you, every single day, you need to look yourself in the mirror and know that they tried to end this all. They tried to kill Donald Trump. They tried to end the movement. They tried to end this election with one bullet, and they failed. And the story of Saturday is not about that evil lunatic and what he tried to do. It's not about the bullet that grazed Donald Trump's ear. It's about what Donald Trump did. when he got up. Saturday, July 13th, 2024 is about this. It always will be. This is who we are. This is what will lead us to Election Day. And most importantly, this is going to lead us in fixing everything that's broken in this country. It starts today. If he can take a bullet and get up and remind us who we are and who we can be, then surely we can do what we need to do to make sure that we have nothing but victory in November and in the years ahead. Thank you so much for watching today. My name is Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.